Oh God, it's so exciting.
Happy Hail Bob Day.
It is a happy Hail Bob Day.
Hello, the curse of damn.
It's the best finishing score we've seen at 5-star level.
That was our elo coming into the competition.
Eventing Manager is back.
Best show that we have, Alphabetti Spaghetti.
Looking forward to seeing quality horses.
Still a great day for Ireland.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
I mean, you're a bit of an eventing geek just like us.
And it's time to get on with the show. Welcome to the EquiRatings Jumping Podcast, and listeners, we have got an exclusive insight for you because the EquiRatings Jumping Podcast is now live. As you know, we have been going into jumping a lot more over the last year, and the Jumping Podcast, which has been in the works for the last couple of years, is now officially live. So we thought that we would give you a little snippet as to what is in store over on our sister show, The Jumping Pod. And this is the first section of the first ever episode, which is all about nations in 2021, how they've shaped up, who's been brilliant, who has been slightly disappointing perhaps, were there any surprises, and what did the numbers tell us. So this will give you a real insight. It is, yes, a jumping show, so obviously we're on the Eventing Podcast telling you about it, but hopefully it is something that will really, really interest you. And if you like it, don't forget to give it a handy little follow, a handy little subscribe. You can find the Jumping Pod at Jumping Podcast on social media, and make sure you follow us there as well. Hit subscribe. We're starting from zero all over again, and it's exciting times. So big plans for jumping in EquiRatings world in 2022. And this is the first step in the Jumping Podcast journey. So enjoy.
Hello, show jumping world. It is the EquiRatings Jumping Podcast. We have arrived. I am Sam Watson. I get to host this show. I am joined by my co-founder of EquiRatings, Dermot Byrne, who I will introduce. You'll have to get used to him, folks. Sometimes he's grumpy, sometimes he's very analytical and insightful, but we will see where we get to. This podcast, folks, is going to bring you, firstly, what we think, and we've yet to see any evidence against it, the best rating in the sport. It gives that context. Statistics, great. You know, there are horses achieving great things in the sport right now, but we design the ratings that matter most because they tell you not just how many people you've beaten, but they're looking at who you've beaten, the quality, the consistency. We've seen a big change at the top of the sport literally in the last week, which is King Edward becoming the highest rated horse in the world, overtaking Explosion. We'll get into it. We'll get into what that rating is. This show is all about the nations, the countries, sort of looking forward to the World Games, absolutely reflecting on a feast of championships this year with the Olympic Games in Tokyo, the European Championships, having 2 championships in 1 year. How cool was that? And of course, the Barcelona Nations Cup final as well. So we're going to be reviewing that. We're going to be focusing on those countries. We're going to bring you the ratings that you'll have never had access before, and you're going to continue to get them on this podcast. You get fun stuff too, like Jumping Manager, which is going to come out, and being able to have your say on what's going to happen in the sport. And it feels like a good time to bring in my co-host and colleague, Dermot Byrne. How you do?
Good, thanks, Sam. Yeah, delighted to be here at last. After all the talk and planning, it's probably 3-4 years of behind-the-scenes conversations as to when we were going to first move into jumping. So to finally be here is interesting and exciting. But I suppose before we go on air, we were discussing like what do we bring, you know, and that was probably a big reason that we delayed moving into this world. We obviously have come from eventing. We've made our name in eventing through working with all the Olympic teams, working with all the federations, working with fans in different ways. It was all built around ratings, whether it was safety ratings and helping to manage risk, whether it was performance ratings for the teams, whether it was ratings which allowed fans to understand a little bit more context around the sport. Everything that we were doing was built around understanding ratings. Why did we delay coming into this world? A sport which is so heavily built and designed on, you know, understanding who's the best and why. Why did we delay? And I think the key was we needed to find where was our angle? Where was the most value that we felt we were going to be able to bring? I'm excited now. I was nervous 3 years ago because I thought show jumping is so much bigger and shinier, and it's going to be so much more difficult to access. It's going to be such a more difficult sport to analyze. It's only whether the polls stay up or down. How are we going to really bring as much insight as we've provided to a whole other sport from just those little bits? And then we started. Then we started getting into it, and we realized actually there's massive value here. There was moments over the last 6 months, wasn't there, where, with Georgia, our main analyst behind the scenes on show jumping, where we had the ELO rating designed, we were testing it in jumping, and suddenly, we're going to come on to it, but moments like Sweden winning the Olympic Games, having gone in there as a top-rated team, we got a little bit more validation. We were looking at our top-rated horses behind the scenes, jumping clear and jumping clear and jumping clear. Every week we're watching GCT, GCL, and we're looking at our top-rated ELO GCL team coming through. We're looking at the top-rated ELO horse in a GCT coming through, jumping clear, nearly always going on to finish in those top places. And that was the difference between 3 years ago and now, when I thought, I am nervous about bringing what we have to jumping. And 3 years later, when we've got those ratings going, you have got to tell the world. This is something that is so special. This is something that can help change how fans experience the sport, how managers manage. We have got to tell everybody. Now, when we're starting a podcast, where are we? Episode 1. No one's going to really hear about it. This is a podcast that people might go back and listen to in a year's time, and they go, I wonder how they started that pod. So we're going to be broadcasting to nobody at the start. But shame on us if we don't actually tell the story using ratings for the sport. It's a massive sport. It's a massive opportunity, and the ratings are here at last to do it. So now we go. And that's where I think we are now. Episode 1 of the very first jumping podcast. Let's tell them what we have.
Feeling the passion, D. Feeling the passion. I'm so glad we nearly called I nearly called the company EquiStats, and what a disaster, because EquiRatings, like the difference between a stat, which horse has won the most amount of competitions this year versus a rating. And I'll give you a really good example of this is your European champion, DSP Chikaria, never won an international show jumping class until the European Championships. But the third highest rated horse on this ELO rating, that's something you're going to hear, folks. That's kind of our piece de resistance at the moment. It is our best number in terms of ranking horses and rating horses. Third highest rated horse going into the Europeans because of the consistency that he was performing at in the top level competitions and beating other good horses as well. It's not just about whether you win, it's about whether you're winning against good opponents, because that's giving you a feel of the strength. Like, not every Grand Prix is a tough Grand Prix. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is variance. We all know it. You're watching an Aachen versus a somewhere else, and they're not all as tough.
I was so disappointed that you chickened out of like the
I couldn't.
I thought you were going to go for it.
No, you can put some people on a pedestal. Very hard to put a country down. We might put a country down in a minute when we start getting into the top 10 nations. So where we're going to start, like, you can't start anywhere else except for our Olympic champions, Sweden. Okay, so we're giving you a little view of the landscape when it comes to nations. Most of you listening to this belong to a nation that competes in the sport of show jumping. So what kind of shape is your country, and is sort of where we're getting to, and what does the landscape look like? Did we see Sweden coming for the Olympics? We absolutely did. We have Paddy Power receipts. For anyone who doesn't know, Paddy Power is a bookmaker in Ireland who decides to bet on equestrian sports only for the Olympic Games, and Sweden were 25-1. They didn't see them coming. Everyone was talking about Switzerland, they were talking about Germany, they were talking about Belgium, they were talking about the Netherlands, and there was good reasons for that. But actually Sweden, if we rewind the clock 12 months, they weren't there on ratings. But you rewind the clock 6 months going into the Olympics, they had the highest rated team. And it's easy to say that now in hindsight, because they were unbelievable on the day. It's a terrible word, unbelievable, because it's happening in front of your eyes. But they were so good in the individual competition, all three of them getting through to the jump off, and then to go and do it again in round 1 of the team competition and again in round 2. There was actually that moment, D, going into round 2 of the nations, of the team event at the Olympics, when actually Sweden, for how good they had been all week, they weren't that far. Like, they were beatable and catchable. And I was going, it would be so unjust if they didn't win this because they've been so good. But they did. They delivered it, and it was pretty spectacular to watch.
Two things I want to add on that. One is we're talking about them a year ago, and we're saying, okay, Fredriksson, if you go with Van Eckerman, whoever you pick, right? They're all going to be top names. They're rightly that they're always sort of in and around there. But what 2021 has done, really interesting, following the rating, not just for the team, but for the individual horses over the course of the season, is actually we're going to be talking about them in a different realm, I think, in 2022. Even if one or two of those horses come out, they actually, if you think like, say, if Catch Me Not comes in for Fredriksson, then you're actually looking at, the drop isn't really going to be that much at all. As a team, it looks to us from the ratings that we're going to see, and we'll go into what those numbers are in a little bit more detail in a second. But what it's beginning to look like is actually you're seeing one of the first, not the first, but certainly in terms of the ratings, one of the super teams. So not only are we talking about them kind of developing over the course of 2021, but when you've got three horses all maintaining an ELO rating of over 800, we're seeing a drop, such a drop to the other teams that it's beginning to get interesting as to like how much can they dominate the sport? Not can they dominate the sport, but by how much can this team dominate the sport? Why I'm bringing that up at that exact point, Sam, is because I think it's a really interesting conversation that you can be having, and still, you're reminding me of going into the gold medal moments at the Olympics, and it's possible that they don't win it. It's what makes the sport, and it's what makes ratings very important as opposed to statistics, as you say, or even more importantly, as opposed to a single result. You can lose and still be the top team. We are looking at three of the top horses, probably 5, 6 of the top horses, certainly 5, I would say, in Sweden right now. 5 of the top horses that they've ever had and that we have in the sport right now. It obviously doesn't mean they'll win everything, but they are primed they're in a position to seriously dominate the sport if they can maintain form.
So there you have it, listeners, a sneaky little intro to the EquiRatings Jumping Podcast. If you would like to listen to that show in full, you can search the Jumping Podcast across any of your podcast platforms, hit subscribe, give us a like or two, leave us a review because that is massively important. And we hope you enjoy. There will be lots more jumping action coming your way, and of course lots more on EquiRatings Eventing Podcast too. But now though, that is all we've got time for. We'll be back very soon. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the EquiRatings Eventing Podcast.
Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I look forward to having you back with us soon.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more.
Listeners, we'll speak to you again soon.